war on Zareth 9 had ended in silence. Only the wind carried the smell of burned metal and ash. The once green valleys were now graves of machines and men. The Tyrell Dominion had won, their banners flying high over shattered human outposts. Ethan Cole opened his eyes to the cold sting of rain. He was lying among ruins, half buried in debris. His arm was broken, his armor cracked, and his rifle was gone. Around him stood tall figures with silver-blue skin and glowing eyes. The Tyrell soldiers. They were quiet, disciplined, and terrifyingly calm. "Human, do not move," one of them ordered. Ethan smiled weakly. "Wasn't planning to, mate." The alien looked confused, its translation implant buzzing. Two soldiers grabbed him and dragged him to their armored transport. Hours later, he found himself inside a dim cell aboard a hovering fortress. Metal walls hummed with alien energy, and strange symbols glowed faintly around the door. The air smelled of iron and ozone. Ethan sat quietly, counting his breaths, trying not to think about pain or fear. The door hissed open, and in stepped Commander Vera. She was taller than the others, her armor black and gold. Her presence felt like a blade, cold, sharp, and dangerous. Her eyes were a deep violet, glowing faintly in the dark. "You are the last surviving human soldier from the Western Front," she said, her voice smooth but stern. Ethan tilted his head. "Lucky me, huh?" Vera frowned. "You will answer my questions." "Sure," Ethan said, leaning back against the wall. "But maybe after you tell me your name, darling." The translator clicked softly, and for a heartbeat the air froze. Vera's fingers tightened around her datapad. Her heartbeat spiked. The alien guards looked at her confused. "What did you call me?" she asked slowly. "Darling," Ethan repeated with a smirk. "It's kind of a human thing." For a long second, Vera said nothing. Her tail flicked once, betraying a spark of something. Irritation or confusion, she wasn't sure. She had faced human commanders who screamed, soldiers who begged, prisoners who cursed. But never one who smiled. Never one who spoke like this. "You mock your captor," she said, trying to sound calm. "No," Ethan replied softly. "I'm just being polite." Her gaze stayed on him longer than intended. There was something different about this human. His eyes didn't hold hatred or fear, only exhaustion and warmth. It unsettled her more than she would admit. She turned sharply. "Prepare him for interrogation cycle 2, she ordered, and left the room. But even as the doors closed, the sound of that one strange word echoed in her mind. "Darling." That night, Vera stood alone in her quarters, staring at the city lights below the fortress. Her mind replayed the scene again and again. She had studied hundreds of human languages, their history, their wars. But this word, darling, it had never come up in her briefings. It felt soft, dangerous. She opened her datapad and searched the human linguistic database. The translation came up quickly. An affectionate word used for someone deeply loved. Vera froze. Her eyes narrowed. Her pulse quickened. Loved. She slammed the datapad shut, annoyed at herself for even reacting. Humans were emotional creatures. Irrational, impulsive, weak. Yet something about that single word had pierced through the iron walls she had built around her heart. The next morning, she returned to the interrogation chamber. Ethan was sitting cross-legged, humming quietly to himself. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "Morning, darling," he said again, gently this time. "Do not call me that," she snapped. "Sorry," he said, still smiling. "Habit." She ignored him and began the questioning. "Why did your species invade the Western Front despite our warnings?" Ethan shrugged. "Because we thought you were threatening innocent colonies." "You humans always justify your wars," she said bitterly. "And you aliens always think you're above feelings," he replied calmly. Her eyes narrowed. "Feelings make us weak." Ethan looked at her quietly for a long moment. "No," he said softly. "They make you alive." The words hit her harder than she expected. Her throat tightened. She stood up quickly. "Enough," she said, turning toward the door. But before she could leave, Ethan said quietly, "You know, Vera, you don't have to be just a soldier." She stopped, her back still facing him. "And what else should I be?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Someone who knows what it feels like to be called darling." The door closed behind her with a soft hiss. But her heart did not calm down. That single word, That simple sound had become a crack in her armor. In the corridor, she paused, pressing her hand against her chest. The pulse beneath her fingers was fast and unsteady, something she had not felt since childhood training. For the first time in years, Commander Vera of the Tyrell Dominion felt human.
And somewhere in the dark cell below, Ethan Cole smiled to himself, whispering, "Gotcha, darling." The fortress above Zareth 9 floated like a silent predator in the sky, lightning flashing across the storm clouds beneath it. Commander Vera stood at the balcony, staring at the lightning while her mind fought against itself. The human's voice would not leave her thoughts. That one strange sound, "darling," echoed again and again. She had faced 1,000 screams on battlefields, but this single gentle word felt louder than all of them. Every time she remembered the way he said it, something inside her chest tightened. She tried to meditate, tried to slow her heart rate, but even the air felt different now. Warmer, softer, dangerous. When dawn came, she ordered another interrogation. She told herself it was duty, but deep down she knew the truth. She was curious. She wanted to understand this strange creature who smiled while chained, who spoke like war was just another storm that would pass. Ethan was sitting calmly when she entered. His wrists were bound, his face bruised, but his eyes still carried that same spark. He looked up and said, "Morning, Commander," with that easy human grin. She folded her arms. "You survived the night, human." "Yeah," he said lightly. "Your hospitality isn't as bad as I expected." Vera frowned. "You think this is a game?" He looked straight at her. "No, I think this is a misunderstanding." Her jaw tightened. "You invaded Tyrell space, destroyed our defense satellites, killed our people." Ethan met her glare. "And how many humans did your people kill before that?" Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. Vera's tail twitched once. She hated that his words made sense. She had studied war strategy her entire life, but never the emotions behind it. Then Ethan spoke again, softer. "Vera, may I ask you something?" She raised an eyebrow. "You dare to ask me a question?" He smiled. "You can kill me later. Just let me ask one." She hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Ask." "What do you fight for?" He said quietly, "Really?" Vera blinked. No one had ever asked her that before, not even her superiors. Her answer came automatically. Honor, duty, empire. Ethan tilted his head. "That's what they told you." She glared at him. "That's what I believe." "Is it?" he asked softly. "Because when I called you darling, your face said something else." Her breath caught. The translator device hummed faintly, repeating the word again as if mocking her. "Darling?" Vera's voice dropped low. "That word, it means nothing." Ethan smiled sadly. "If it meant nothing, you wouldn't be here." Her hands clenched, her claws scraping against the table. For a second, she wanted to strike him, to silence the feeling crawling up her chest, but she couldn't, because he was right. "Tell me what it means," she said suddenly, almost a whisper. Ethan leaned forward, his tone gentle. "It means someone who matters to you more than yourself." Vera froze. She could not process that kind of meaning. On Tyrell worlds, emotion was weakness, attachment was punished, love was a forgotten word. He continued, "When a human says, 'darling,' they mean, you're special, precious, worth fighting for." Her heart pounded louder. She turned away, hiding her face. "Stop," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You twist words to weaken me." Ethan shook his head. "No, I'm trying to remind you what strength really is." Vera stormed out, the door hissing shut behind her. She walked fast through the corridors, her mind burning with confusion. She had fought 100 wars, but this human was the first enemy to wound her without touching her. In the quiet of her chamber, she removed her armor, standing before the mirror. The metal plates fell away one by one, revealing pale blue skin and scars from decades of battle. For the first time, she looked at herself and wondered who she really was beneath all that steel. She sat down and replayed the human's voice from the recording logs. "You don't have to be just a soldier," he had said. His tone had been warm, sincere. The way he said darling made her chest ache. Her tail coiled nervously as she whispered the word aloud, testing it. Dar-ling. The sound felt strange on her tongue, soft and alive. She caught her reflection blushing faintly, her crest glowing dimly with violet light. She quickly turned away, frustrated with herself. Later that night, she checked the human's vitals on her datapad. His wounds had reopened, his pulse weak. Without thinking, she went to the medical bay. The guards saluted but hesitated when they saw her expression. "Leave us," she ordered. Vera approached his bed. He was half asleep, breathing heavily. When she touched the controls to stabilize his vitals, his eyes opened slowly. "Commander," he murmured, his voice weak. "Don't talk," she said, adjusting the monitor. "You're losing strength," he smiled faintly. "You came back." Vera's heart stuttered. "I came to make sure you live long enough to answer my questions." He chuckled softly. "Sure. Questions." Her hand hovered over his wrist for a second, feeling the warmth of his skin. Human warmth. The scientists had written about it, but feeling it was different. It was comforting. "Thank you," he whispered, eyes half closed. "Darling." Her hand froze, the room fell silent. Her pulse roared in her ears. She should have been angry, but instead she felt a strange peace. She stood there for a long time, watching his steady breathing. When she finally turned to leave, she looked back once more, whispering words she could barely believe came from her lips. "Sleep well, human." As the doors closed behind her, she pressed her hand to her chest again, feeling her own heartbeat faster than ever. That single human word had done what no weapon ever could. It had broken the warrior. Days passed aboard the fortress, but something invisible had changed. The air felt heavier, and the soldiers whispered when their commander walked by. Commander Vera, once known for her icy discipline, now seemed distracted. Her strikes in combat training were slower, her focus slipping. Every night she heard the human's voice echoing in her mind. Darling, soft, reckless, unforgettable. She tried to drown it in work, in weapon drills, in reports, but the more she resisted, the more it haunted her. When she finally gave up pretending, she found herself walking toward the detention sector again, telling herself it was for research. Ethan sat on the floor of his cell, humming a slow tune. His wrists were unbound this time, and a small light above him flickered with each pulse of the ship's power core. When he saw her, he smiled. "You look tired, Commander." "I do not get tired," she said, but her voice lacked its old sharpness. He tilted his head. "Then why do your eyes look like you've been fighting ghosts?" She stopped at the door, staring at him through the energy field. "You talk too much." "You listen too much," he replied. Something in his calmness disarmed her again. He was just a fragile human, unarmed, trapped, yet he looked at her like she was someone more than a weapon. "Why do you not fear me?" she asked finally, her tone quiet. "Because," Ethan said, "you've already saved me twice." She frowned. "I saved you for information." He shook his head. "No, you saved me because something inside you refused to let me die." Her throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but the truth shimmered beneath her skin like heat. "You humans twist everything," she muttered. He chuckled softly. "Maybe," he said, "but sometimes we twist things into something beautiful." Vera turned off the energy barrier and stepped inside. Her guards gasped behind her, but she ignored them. "Leave us," she ordered. The guards hesitated, then obeyed, the door sliding shut with a soft hiss. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Am I that special today?" "Do not mistake curiosity for care," she warned, though her tone lacked conviction. He looked at her gently. "Curiosity is the beginning of care." Her jaw clenched. "Humans and their words," she said, but this time her lips almost formed a smile. He noticed. "There, that's better," he said softly. "You should smile more, Vera." Her name on his lips made her pulse jump. She looked away. "You speak as if you know me." "Maybe I do," he said. "You act strong because you're afraid of breaking." Her eyes snapped to him, glowing faintly. "I do not break." He leaned closer. "Everyone breaks, darling. The brave ones rebuild." The word hit her like a heartbeat. Her armor hummed, reacting to her rising temperature. Her tail flicked nervously and she stepped back. "Stop calling me that." Ethan smiled. "You started it." Vera glared, but the fire in her chest refused to cool. "You humans," she said quietly. "You are dangerous in ways I was never trained for." "Maybe," he said, "but I think you like that." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Vera studied his face. The scars, the tired eyes, the calm courage, and she realized she didn't see an enemy anymore. She saw someone. Later that night, in her private quarters, she replayed their conversation again and again. The way he said Vera, the way he said darling, each time she heard it, the steel walls in her mind softened. But outside, rumors were spreading fast. Her second-in-command, Captain Roshek, had already reported her unusual behavior to high command. "The human prisoner influences her," he whispered in the council chambers. "She is compromised." Orders were sent from the Terrell Empire. Ethan Cole was to be executed within 48 hours. When Vera received the message, her hands trembled. The screen blurred before her eyes. She had known this would happen, but she wasn't ready for it. That evening, she visited his cell again.
The metallic corridors of the fortress pulsed with red light, warning sirens echoing through its walls. Commander Vera walked quickly, every step a storm of conflict. She had just read the order again. Terminate the human immediately. High Command's seal burned at the bottom of the message like a brand. For the first time in her long career, she didn't obey. Inside the command chamber, Captain Roshek stood waiting, his eyes cold. "You've delayed the execution long enough, Commander," he said. "Your judgment is clouded." Vera's voice was steady. "The human still has strategic value." Roshek narrowed his gaze. "Value or influence?" She met his stare without flinching. "Do not question my authority." "I already did," he replied sharply. "High Command agrees. Your behavior threatens the Empire." Before she could respond, an alarm cut through their argument. A deep rumble shook the fortress. Reports crackled through the comm. Rebel faction attacking from orbit. Breach in Sector 7. Roshek barked orders to deploy troops, but Vera was already moving, her instincts faster than thought. She grabbed her plasma spear and sprinted toward the hangar. The sky outside blazed with explosions as smaller ships tore through the clouds. Amid the chaos, her thoughts were not on the battle, but on Ethan. If the rebels reached the detention deck, they would kill him before she could explain herself. She didn't know why she cared, only that she did. When she reached the cell block, she found him trying to stand, the ground trembling beneath his feet. "Guess that's not your people dropping fireworks?" he asked with a weak smile. "Stay close," she ordered, slicing through his restraints with one clean motion. "Wait, you're freeing me?" "Don't speak," she snapped, pulling him to his feet, but her grip was careful, protective. They ran through the corridors as the fortress shuddered again, plasma fire streaking past the windows. The alarms drowned every sound except her heart pounding in her ears. A squad of Terrell soldiers appeared around the corner, weapons raised. "Commander, step away from the human." Vera hesitated for a fraction of a second, and then she did something that changed everything. She turned her weapon on them. The soldiers froze. "Commander, what are you doing?" Her voice cracked with fury. "He is under my protection." One soldier tried to argue. "But High Command can judge me later," she said, and fired. A burst of energy ripped through the corridor, stunning them long enough for her to pull Ethan through the smoke. As they ran, he looked at her with disbelief. "You just shot your own people." She didn't answer. The truth was too heavy. They burst into the hangar, flames licking the walls. Fighters were exploding as enemy ships strafed the deck. Vera grabbed an escape craft, dragging Ethan aboard. "Strap in," she said. "We have one chance." He laughed breathlessly. "You sure you can fly this thing?" She gave him a sideways glance. "I can fly anything." The engines roared to life. She slammed the throttle forward and the ship burst from the hangar into open sky. Behind them, the fortress erupted in fire, black smoke coiling into the storm clouds. Vera, Ethan said softly, gripping the console. You just turned against your entire empire for me. She didn't look at him. You call it betrayal, she said quietly. I call it clarity. The communication screen flickered on. Rashek's face filled the cockpit. Commander Vera, you are charged with treason, he snarled. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Vera's fingers hovered over the comm switch. Rashek, listen to me. This war is built on lies. Silence, he roared. You will die for this. The channel cut off. Enemy fighters appeared on the radar, closing fast. Ethan looked at her. You can't fight them all. Her lips curved slightly. I wasn't planning to fight. She pulled the ship into a dive, cutting through clouds and lightning. The pursuing ships followed, firing bolts of plasma that lit up the sky. She twisted the controls, maneuvering through wreckage and debris with impossible precision. Ethan gripped the seat. Remind me never to question your driving again. A small laugh escaped her, the first he had ever heard from her. It sounded like wind through glass, sharp, beautiful, and fleeting. Finally, they broke through the atmosphere, space stretching vast and cold before them. The stars looked different now, no longer distant but full of possibility. Vera looked at Ethan, her violet eyes glowing softly. You asked me once what I fight for, she said. I finally have an answer. He leaned closer, his voice gentle. What is it? She hesitated, the corners of her mouth softening. You, she said quietly. The silence between them felt infinite, broken only by the hum of the engines. Ethan whispered, You don't have to say that just because I called you. She interrupted, Darling, the word escaping her lips like a secret. I know. Outside, the Tyrell ships closed in again, but she didn't look away. For that one fragile moment, they were not soldier and prisoner, not alien and human, just two souls caught between stars. As the first missile locked on, she smiled faintly. Hold on tight, darling. The ship plunged into hyperspace, disappearing into the dark, leaving the Tyrell fleet spinning in their wake. Far behind them, the Empire whispered her name like a curse, but somewhere deep inside Vera's heart, it felt like freedom. The stars stretched into rivers of light as their small ship tore through hyperspace, leaving behind the smoking wreck of the Tyrell fortress. Inside the cockpit, alarms flickered, and sparks danced across the panels. The ship was half damaged, its shields barely stable. Ethan sat in the co-pilot seat, breathing hard, his face pale under the soft blue glow of the console. Tell me we're not about to explode, he muttered. Vera's hands moved swiftly over the controls. Not yet, she replied, her voice calm but sharp. We just outran a war fleet. Your heart should still be intact. He smiled faintly. Can't promise that, Commander. She shot him a glance. Do not call me Commander. What should I call you then? He asked. She paused, her violet eyes flickering toward him. Vera, she said quietly. The sound of her own name spoken aloud like that felt strange, almost human. After several tense minutes, the shaking stopped. The stars returned to their stillness, leaving a vast silence in their wake. Vera exhaled slowly. We are clear, she said. Ethan leaned back in his seat, laughing softly. Then I guess we're fugitives now. She turned off the navigation lights. You guess correctly. Outside, endless stars filled the black, vast, and eternal. It was beautiful, but it was also deadly. They were alone, hunted, and one mistake could mean capture or death. Vera began scanning nearby systems. We need a place to land, she murmured. The ship's reactor is unstable. Ethan looked out the window. Somewhere quiet? Somewhere forgotten, she corrected. Hours later, they descended toward a barren moon orbiting a dying gas giant. The surface was gray and scarred by meteor strikes. They landed near a canyon filled with old mining wrecks. The ship groaned as it settled into the dust. When the engines finally died, silence filled the cabin. Vera leaned back, exhausted. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Only their breathing filled the space. Ethan finally broke the silence. You saved me. You make that sound like it was a choice, she said dryly. He smiled. Wasn't it? Vera didn't answer. Her fingers traced the edge of her gauntlet, the black metal reflecting the dim light. The Empire will send trackers, she said. They never forgive betrayal. Then we keep running, Ethan replied. Humans are good at that. Vera tilted her head, studying him. You sound like you've done this before. He shrugged. Escaping, surviving, loving the impossible. It's kind of our thing. That word, loving, hung in the air longer than it should have. Vera looked away quickly. Rest, she said softly. We will move at dawn. As Ethan drifted into sleep on the floor beside the power console, Vera sat awake, watching the stars through the cracked viewport. Each point of light seemed to whisper his word again. Darling. Her chest ached. She had trained her whole life to be unshakable, unfeeling, but now her armor felt heavier than ever. She looked down at Ethan, his chest rising and falling, peaceful even in exile. Strange human, she whispered. You make me weak. Morning came slowly on the moon's surface, pale light spilling through the dust. Ethan woke to find her outside the ship, scanning the horizon. He joined her, the wind tugging at his jacket. You ever get tired of standing guard? He asked. It is what I was made for, she said, then added after a pause. But I do not know what I am now. He smiled softly. Maybe you're becoming what you were meant to be. She looked at him. And what is that? He met her gaze. Alive. For a long moment she said nothing. The wind carried the sound of the dying planet's storms far above them. Then a faint signal interrupted their moment. The ship's distress beacon was still transmitting. Her eyes widened. No. She ran back inside, cutting the power line, but it was too late. They found us. A red indicator flashed on the scanner. Multiple ships inbound. Ethan grabbed a weapon from the rack. You've got to be kidding. Run, she ordered, grabbing his arm. They sprinted through the canyon, weaving between old machinery and broken stone. Blaster fire cracked across the rocks, sending shards flying. Vera spun, her spear flashing, deflecting shots with inhuman precision. She moved like a storm, graceful and deadly. Go, she shouted, covering him. Ethan ducked behind an old mining rig, firing back at their pursuers. You're insane, you know that? Her eyes glowed fiercely. I learned from a human. A ship descended overhead, wind whipping their hair and dust into the air. A mechanical voice boomed from above. Commander Vera of the Tyrell Dominion, surrender the fugitive and your sentence may be merciful. Vera raised her weapon, defiant. Mercy is not in your nature. The ship fired again, a blast knocking both her and Ethan to the ground. The impact sent her helmet flying, revealing her face fully for the first time. Soft, strong, scarred, and strangely beautiful. Ethan crawled toward her, coughing. Vera! She pushed herself up, blood streaking her cheek. Get to the ship, she gasped. I'm not leaving you. She looked at him, her voice breaking for the first time. If they capture you, they'll break you like they broke me. He shook his head. Then let them try. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the wrecked ship, explosions lighting up the sky around them. Together, they leapt aboard and sealed the hatch. The engine screamed as Vera forced the ship into the air. The hull groaned under the strain. The atmosphere burned red as they broke free once more, as the moon vanished behind them. Ethan looked at her and said softly, You could have left me. Her voice trembled. Don't ask me to do what I no longer can. He smiled faintly. Then we keep running. She looked ahead at the stars. Until the stars forget our names. The ship vanished into the void once more. Two fugitives bound not by war, but by something far more dangerous. The stars were endless, an ocean of silver fire stretching in every direction. Their ship, once a symbol of Tyrell authority, now drifted like a ghost through forbidden sectors, silent except for the faint hum of its wounded engines. For weeks, Vera and Ethan had traveled from one dying station to another, scavenging fuel, food, and fragments of hope. They hid in asteroid fields, slept under flickering lights, and shared silence that spoke louder than words. Every system they entered brought new danger, bounty hunters, mercenary fleets, even automated patrols, all searching for the rogue commander and her human. 2 million credits, Ethan muttered, staring at the bounty notice flickering across the holoscreen. That's flattering. Vera's voice was calm but weary. You are expensive trouble, he grinned. Worth every coin, though. She glanced at him. You overestimate your value. He leaned back, hands behind his head. Maybe, but you didn't let me die. Her eyes flicked to the stars. Sometimes, mercy is the harder path. The ship shook suddenly as a proximity alarm blared. Vera's posture straightened instantly. Incoming vessel fast. Ethan slid into the co-pilot seat. How fast? Too fast, she said, tightening her grip on the controls. The radar showed 3 red dots closing in. Hunters! Laser fire streaked across the black, lighting up the void like lightning. Their shields flared, cracking under the assault. Hold on! Vera shouted. The ship spun, diving through an asteroid field. Rocks smashed against the hull as she weaved between shadows. Each movement was precise, instinctive. She was dancing with death. Ethan clung to his seat. I take back what I said. You are insane. Insanity is human, she said, her lips twitching. You taught me that. A missile exploded close by, sending the ship tumbling. Sparks filled the cabin. Alarms howled. Ethan grabbed the manual control and pulled hard, steadying the craft. For a moment, their hands touched on the controls, and the chaos around them faded, just the two of them, side by side against the galaxy. On your left, Ethan shouted. I see it, she replied, spinning the ship through a narrow gap between 2 asteroids. The enemy craft clipped the rock and exploded in a shower of molten debris. 1 down, Ethan said breathlessly. 2 remain. Vera corrected. She rerouted all remaining power to the engines. If we make it to the nebula ahead, their scanners will lose us. Big if, Ethan muttered. They entered the swirling blue mist of the nebula, the dense gases clouding every sensor. Lightning arced across the sky like the veins of gods. The last 2 ships fired blindly, their shots disappearing into the haze. Vera cut the engines, letting the ship drift silently. The hunters passed overhead, searching, missing them by inches. When their signals finally faded, the silence returned. Only the slow rhythm of the ship's systems filled the air. Ethan exhaled. You're something else, Vera. Her voice softened. I was trained to survive. He looked at her. No. You were born to feel. The words hung between them, electric and dangerous. She looked away, but not fast enough to hide the glow rising in her cheeks. Later, while Ethan repaired the damaged panels, Vera sat in the cockpit, watching the nebula's light ripple across the hull. She remembered her first command, her first kill, her first victory. All of it had meant something once, but now it felt hollow. When Ethan joined her, his hands stained with grease, she asked quietly, Why do you keep smiling, even when death follows us? He shrugged. Because smiling reminds me I'm still alive. She stared at him, her violet eyes glowing faintly. Humans are strange. Maybe, he said, leaning closer. But you like strange. She hesitated, then whispered, I do not dislike it. For a moment, their eyes locked, and the air between them shimmered with tension. His hand brushed against hers, not by accident, and she didn't pull away. Before either could speak, the comm crackled to life. An encrypted transmission from deep space. A distorted voice said, Commander Vera, this is Rashek. Surrender now. You cannot hide forever. Her blood turned cold. He found us. Ethan clenched his jaw. Then we run again. She shook her head. No, if we keep running, we'll die running. He frowned. What's the alternative? She turned to face him fully, her expression fierce. We end it. Ethan stared, realizing what she meant. You're talking about facing them. Yes, she said, her voice steady. They think I'm a traitor, but I will show them what truth really looks like. He studied her, the warrior who had once been his captor, now his protector. You really are the most dangerous woman in the galaxy, he said softly. She met his gaze. And you, Ethan Cole, are the most reckless human alive. He smiled. Maybe that's why we work. For a heartbeat, the tension broke, and she let out a small laugh, rare, quiet, and real. Outside, the nebula pulsed with light, and their ship drifted forward into the unknown. They didn't know if they would survive the next day, but as long as they had the stars, the silence, and each other, it was enough. And somewhere beyond the void, the Empire's fleets prepared for war, unaware that the human they had hunted had already changed the heart of their fiercest warrior forever. The universe held its breath. The Tyrell war fleet, hundreds of gleaming vessels, moved across the void like a storm of steel and fire. At their center waited Rashek's flagship, an enormous shadow blotting out the stars, and somewhere beyond that wall of warships, a single small vessel drifted silently, half-broken but unyielding. Inside it, Vera stood before the viewport, the faint blue of hyperspace scars reflecting in her eyes. Her armor was cracked, scorched from battles that never seemed to end. Ethan sat behind her, checking the controls that barely held together. "This is suicide," he said quietly, though there was no fear in his voice. "You know that, right?" She turned slightly, a faint, almost playful smile on her lips. "Humans call it courage." He grinned. "We also call it crazy." Her gaze softened. "Perhaps I learned both from you." Outside, the comm crackled to life. Rashek's voice thundering across the stars. "Commander Vera, surrender yourself. You have betrayed your kind. Your existence is a disgrace to the Dominion." Vera lifted her chin, her voice cold and calm. "I have seen the Dominion's heart, Rashek. It is not duty that drives it. It is fear." Rashek's laughter filled the comm, sharp and hollow. "You sound like a human." She glanced at Ethan, then back to the fleet. "Perhaps that is my greatest victory." Alarms blared as their scanners picked up missile locks. The fleet was arming. Ethan stood beside her, his hands trembling just slightly. "If this is it," he said, "I'm glad I got to spend the end of the universe with you." Her eyes met his, the faint glow in them softening. "Ethan Cole," she whispered, "you gave me something no empire ever could." He smiled faintly. "What's that?" "A reason," she said, and her voice cracked for the first time. "A reason to fight for something real." Outside, the first wave of missiles streaked toward them. Vera's hands moved fast, pulling levers, rerouting power, pushing the ship to its limits. The engines screamed in protest, but the craft dove and rolled through the chaos like a wounded hawk refusing to fall. "Shields at 8%, Ethan shouted, holding onto the console. "Then we make them count," she replied, slamming the controls forward. The small ship plunged straight toward the center of the fleet. Fighters swarmed like insects, lasers cutting across the dark, but Vera flew through it all like she was born in battle. Each move was poetry in motion, every turn, every strike, a declaration that she was still free. Rashek's ship grew larger on the screen, its cannons glowing with death. "Vera!" his voice roared through the comm. "You cannot win!" "Winning isn't the point," she whispered. "They'll remember what we did here." The flagship fired. A colossal beam of light sliced through the void. The shockwave hit them, tearing through the hull. The cockpit burst with sparks. Ethan was thrown to the floor, pain searing his side. "Vera!" he shouted, reaching for her. She pulled herself back into the pilot's seat, blood streaking her cheek. "The reactor's gone unstable," she said. "We can overload it manually, detonate their fleet's core when they fire again." He froze, realizing what she meant. "That'll kill you." "And you," she said softly. He gave a weak laugh. "Guess we'll go together then." She turned to him, her face illuminated by the crimson light of alarms. "Ethan, say it again." He blinked. "Say what?" Her voice trembled. "The word that started this." He looked at her, tears burning behind his eyes. "Darling," he whispered. "Always, darling." She smiled through the pain, her hand finding his. "Now," she said, her voice calm, steady. "Let's show them what it means to feel." He nodded once. Together, they pressed the final command. The reactor flared, white light flooding every shadow. The explosion bloomed like a newborn star, swallowing the fleet, burning away silence and tyranny alike. Far away, observers across a dozen systems saw it and wondered if a star had been born or if a war had ended. Years later, on a quiet human colony, explorers found a drifting beacon. Inside was a recording, a single voice, soft and faint through static. It said, "To whoever finds this, remember, even in the darkest war, a single word can change the universe." Then a second voice, broken but warm, followed. Goodbye, darling. The beacon floated endlessly, carrying their story between the stars. A human who taught an alien to feel, and an alien who reminded humanity what love looked like among the ruins of war. And so ended the tale of Vera and Ethan, not as enemies, not as legends, but as proof that even in the coldest galaxies, the heart still beats.